Ghost Road. Roads. There are so many of them all over the world, but there isn't a single one without a cross or a memorial, flowers, stuffed animals, and other items that people bring on the day of tragedy to honor the memory of those who will never come home. There are dangerous stretches of road, often called death zones, and sometimes entire death roads that take someone's life every day. Everywhere, people search for who's to blame, while some simply believe in eerie spirits or monsters lurking on the roads taking their loved ones. But I know of one single road where no one will ever place a memorial. It doesn't exist on any map, and the people are simply considered missing, forgotten over time, as if they had perished somewhere long ago. I saw that road, and I will never forget the horror. It was autumn, frosty and rainy. My friends and I were driving to a nearby town to get a break from the damn studies that had begun to wear me down. It was our final year, and as future law enforcement officers, we had to give it our all. The constant practical training awaiting us demanded a lot of time and energy, and this was our last weekend before we would forget about rest for a long while. Adam and Derek were laughing and singing silly songs, while I sprawled out in the back seat, trying to nap a little. I was exhausted from my last shift, and had also just argued with my girlfriend, who said I didn't spend enough time with her. Such nonsense. So I decided to spend the weekend with my friends, instead of listening to how terrible I was. We weren't in a rush. The road was slippery, and there was forest all around. The sun was almost non-existent, and the sky displayed its full autumn gloom, enough to put anyone into a depressive mood. Indian summer had bypassed us that year, forcing us to bundle up early in warm clothes. The drizzle was irritating, but I still tried to doze off a bit, to distract myself from my irritation and nerves. Even a little rest and sleep were a great relief for me. My friends continued having fun, and I was almost asleep, but I couldn't shake off a strange feeling of danger. An inner struggle warned me that we should be careful. In general, my intuition has never failed me. I always listened to it, and that day was no exception. I immediately told my friends that a growing sense of panic was building inside me, and we decided to drive slowly. But the further we went, the more I felt fear and anxiety. We had to stop, but the work days were very exhausting, so I decided that we would go. Adam, how much longer until we get there? I had to sit up and look out the window, but everything was the same. Not long, 3 hours at most, but judging by your face, we should probably turn back. He smirked, and Derek turned to me. Ed, I don't know where you get this intuition of yours, but man, you're freaking me out, Derek said, examining me carefully. Don't know, bro. It's been like this since childhood. I shrugged, as Adam decided to pull over to the roadside. Then let's decide. Turning back isn't a problem for me, Adam said seriously. For some it might seem strange, but my friends trusted me and my intuition, not just them either. That's why we were always ready to turn back if needed. No, something's telling me we're completely screwed, and already past the point of no return, I smirked, though it was more hysteria than humor. Neither of them replied, and there was no need. Everyone understood that we shouldn't have gone, and while I was just exhausted, the guys were anxious about the girls waiting for them. They feared we wouldn't be able to make it back. None of us realized at the time that this bad feeling wasn't just a problem, but could cost us our lives. The ride was tense. Nobody joked, and we drove slowly, almost in silence, focusing on the road. At the turn, we wanted to stop because the road was blocked. A crowd stood there, silently holding candles and staring at the sky. We stopped, got out of the car without a word, and immediately got back in. None of us could believe our eyes. While we sat in the car, we could see the crowd. But as soon as we stepped out, the road was empty. Mass hallucinations are possible, but only if you've consumed something. Being sober and stressed, there's no way we could all see the same details. Adam and Derek looked at me. I sat there trying to make sense of it. But apart from wanting to scream and run, I felt nothing at all. It was a strange day, a strange trip, strange visions. Everything was too strange and yet felt inevitable. For some reason, I had this nagging thought that we would have ended up here sooner or later, unable to avoid it. Like it was meant to be us, and here. I'll bet all my money we've lost our minds, Derek muttered nervously, fidgeting with a lighter. Agreed, Adam said, rubbing his eyes to block out the madness. We sat there for about an hour, trying to make calls, but of course there was no signal. It didn't even feel mystical. Just that in this stretch of road, there was no signal at all. We had to do something. After some thought, we decided to try going back. But as soon as we looked behind us, we changed our minds. To our shock, it wasn't just raining. It was pouring heavily, and the road was no longer visible. It was as if we were standing on the border between light and darkness. The road was flooded, water rushing over it like a stream, which meant there was no way back. Adam suggested we wait, hoping someone else might pass through, so we could leave with them. But after another 2 hours, it was clear. We weren't going anywhere. Strangely, no one else showed up. The people in the crowd still stood there, staring at the sky, their candles burning steadily. None of them paid any attention to us. Yet every time we looked out the window, they disappeared as if they had never been there. It was maddening and unsettling. Everything around us felt too stretched out, too unnatural, and deeply unnerving. The car was growing cold, but running the engine to burn gas wasn't an option. We didn't want to get completely stranded. Inside the closed car, there was a faint sense of safety, though we all knew it could just as easily become our coffin. None of us could think about anything but how we might never make it home or get out of here. Derek nervously flicked his lighter. I fiddled with my phone, which couldn't even send an SOS or emergency signal, and Adam gripped the steering wheel, clearly panicking but trying to hold it together. The atmosphere was suffocating. For the first time, I wanted to plead for help or just hide, but we were surrounded by something. We speculated. Maybe we'd entered an anomaly zone, or someone had deliberately released some kind of gas. Even the most far-fetched ideas seemed plausible at that point. The wind picked up, and we shut the windows. A chill seeped into our bones as we stayed motionless in place. All our ideas seemed nonsensical, pointless. Panic dulled our thoughts, and we found ourselves scrutinizing those figures we saw. What were so many people doing here, assuming they weren't just a hallucination? Why could we only see them from inside the car? Should one of us take the risk and walk around them without the car? So many questions, but not a single answer. I think most would agree. Everyone wants to live, and the unknown is terrifying, especially when you can't explain it. The raindrops pounding on the car started to resemble some kind of heavy melody. None of us could identify it, but it was unmistakably ominous. "I have an idea, and it's totally insane," Derek said, looking at us. "Go on," Adam said, just as tense as I was. "Let's just drive as if there's no one here. Since we do not see them when we get out of the car, it is worth trying," Derek said nervously, his voice tinged with fear, clearly unsure if this was the right move. I agreed. I exhaled heavily. I'd been thinking the same thing, but hadn't found a better option. "Ed, man, I'm scared," Adam said softly, but we all heard him. "Me too," I admitted, patting him on the shoulder. Derek did the same. "I can't do it. One of you has to take the wheel. I can't handle this," Adam continued quietly, but his fear was palpable. If the driver was too terrified, it could spell disaster for all of us. "I'll do it. I'll just pretend everything's fine. Just put on some music for me so I don't piss myself from fear," Derek joked, forcing a laugh, and we agreed. Derek had an interesting quirk. When things got too bad, or he felt unnerved, he'd sing or push through it with sheer willpower. It was one of the things we appreciated about him. And honestly, not hearing the melody that made the rain was best. It was more frightening than the people we saw, and didn't see, at the same time. Adam and Derek switched seats, but Adam ultimately moved to the back seat, trembling. I climbed up front next to Derek so he wouldn't feel alone. The guys tightly sealed the windows, double-checked everything, and locked the doors. It was as if we had entombed ourselves inside the car. As soon as we started the car and moved forward, only one question loomed. There was a sharp turn ahead. If we drove too fast, we'd definitely crash. But if we slowed down, what awaited us on this cursed stretch of road? Nearby there was a path, a shortcut we hadn't noticed before or simply dismissed. It cut across the bend, but we'd never taken it. Besides, 4 memorial markers stood next to it, silent witnesses to those who likely failed to navigate the turn. A chill ran down my spine. We didn't know what to do. Should we try to bypass the turn? Maybe it was the logical choice. But what if taking the shortcut was exactly the wrong move? Everything around us was pressing down on us psychologically. Our thoughts were scattered, and we gave in to panic. None of us were in the right frame of mind to think clearly. "Ed, you've got the instincts," Adam said, pale as he stared at the road ahead. "Maybe we draw straws. Let luck decide how we deal with all this, assuming our real problem isn't just that we've lost our minds." "Let's take the gamble," I agreed. It seemed ridiculous to rely on luck, but at least it was a push toward action that we couldn't take. We pulled scraps of paper from the glove box. Each of us wrote one option on the slip. I wrote drive, Adam wrote take the shortcut, and Derek wrote stay put. These weren't what we each thought was right. They were just the only options we had. Derek also suggested we could split up and try all 3 approaches, ensuring someone might make it out, but none of us dared to separate. We folded the slips, placed them in a hat, and shuffled them around. I reached in, but my hand froze. The paper felt icy, as though no choice would save us. I didn't pull out anything. Instead, I glanced out the window. The others sat in silence, their faces tense. Each of us hoped we were missing something, that we just couldn't see the obvious way out. "Stay in the car? Drive forward?" We didn't know the right answer. My nerves gave way. No matter what, we had to act. Derek gripped the wheel, and we all nodded silently to one another before suddenly accelerating. None of us dared to think about the consequences. The car roared to life, tires screeching. Raindrops seemed to race alongside us, battering the roof harder and harder. Then the hail began, hammering down and reducing visibility to nearly nothing. Without a word, Derek abruptly swerved onto the shortcut. The car skidded violently, nearly flipping over. We miraculously avoided a rollover, the vehicle tilting precariously before settling back on its wheels. We caught our breath, our eyes scanning the surroundings. The path was dark but solid, not washed out like the main road. The car, though shaken, started moving again. We crept forward cautiously, our eyes darting to every shadow. Each of us gripped whatever we could, tension gnawing at our nerves. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the relentless pounding of the hail. The road was accompanied by candles that lit up as soon as we passed. Then Adam screamed. We jumped. Derek almost lost grip of the wheel. Near the candles stood all those who had been in the crowd. They were staring directly at us, watching with cold, lifeless eyes. There were women, children, the elderly, brides and grooms. They were all pale, dark shadows under their eyes, and their eyes themselves were dark, not alive. It was all too terrifying, and all I could think about was that they wouldn't rush at us. Derek started singing some song and nervously gripped the wheel. I understood him perfectly. Adam silently watched the whole thing. The road wasn't straight, but winding. It almost seemed like we were driving on a snake. It curved so much. "Faster!" Adam suddenly said, panicking. "It's not worth it. We almost flipped already." Derek sang his song and sped up. But not too much. It seemed like, well, we saw something strange, a mirage or something else. No one was hurting us. But the fact is frightening that with every inch of the road, a candle would light up and a person would stand next to it. One candle, one person. The dark road and the hail hitting the car were nerve-wracking. No one was chasing us, but the whole situation kept throwing bad associations into my panic-filled brain. In front of my eyes, all I could see was the picture of us being buried, and I couldn't shake it off. I wanted to leave as quickly as possible and forget about this forever. I didn't want to think about how we would return. I was ready to take the train, not return to university on time, just to never experience this again. My friends were still holding on. No one was prepared for something like this. How could anyone even be prepared for a situation like this? For us, anything we couldn't explain didn't exist. I tried to come up with an explanation, find a solution to what we were seeing, but I couldn't, and it made me angry. Boiling over with nerves, which had worn out my brain with suspicions and assumptions, I kept pushing away the thoughts that this was beyond our logical understanding. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. "Holy hell!" Derek yelled, and suddenly slammed on the brakes. I hit my knees and head. Yuri almost flew forward between the seats, and Derek slammed into the wheel hard. "What the hell?" Adam snapped, his eyes quickly scanning the surroundings, anticipating danger. It jumped right in front of us!" Derek screamed, deafening us. "Calm down! This is all nonsense! We need to leave and forget about whatever or whoever jumped into the road!" I tried to regain composure and bring them back to their senses. "Get in the driver's seat! I can't handle it!" Derek unbuckled his seatbelt and just let go of the wheel. "All right," I agreed. We swapped places. Adam agreed to sit next to me so that Derek could calm his nerves, though I didn't think that would help much. The car started moving again, and we drove. I didn't sing any songs, but I decided it was better not to stress myself. We didn't drive far, but had to stop because the road led us through a cemetery, and my mind just couldn't process it. And not just mine. What was strange was that the graves were there. They had crosses, and that was it. No flowers, no plaques, and everything was arranged in a strange way. It seemed like the graves were on the roadside, just a winding strip with almost unburied coffins. It was too much. I didn't expect to see this. The crooked crosses at the graves were clearly half destroyed, which only made the situation worse. But when fog started rolling over the ground, I completely lost it. Clutching the clutch, gas pedal, the guys screamed. It wasn't just fear for them, they felt physically sick. Because around each of those graves, people emerged. They were wearing chains, as if they were shackled there. Strange black candles were burning near them, glowing with the same dark light. They looked different from the ones we had seen. They were horrifying but pitiful, and their hungry eyes and outstretched hands reaching toward us. It was clear we needed to get out of there, and quickly. I didn't care that we could crash to our death. It was better to die without knowing what would happen to us than to experience what might come. I sped up like a madman. Adam and Derek started praying. I don't know to whom. But it was clear that in situations like this, everyone suddenly becomes religious. Adam began pulling out various crosses, icons, and charms from the glove compartment, things his grandmother had always given him. He begged for forgiveness for all our sins and asked for help to make it out alive. Derek crossed us all, himself, the car windows, even the still water, and sprayed it all around the car. I laughed like a complete madman and didn't look at the speedometer. It was too scary to see the numbers. The road was getting darker, and I barely managed to catch the turns, so we wouldn't end up crashing into one of those graves. I didn't even want to think about what awaited us. Then, suddenly, my friends fell silent and started listening. But they really shouldn't have. They should have kept praying, creating at least an illusion that we might still believe in a miracle. Despite focusing stubbornly on the road and trying to listen only to the sound of the engine, or rather its roar, I heard what Adam was saying in almost a whisper. "They're telling us they're waiting for us." My friend pressed himself into the seat, his eyes turned red, tears and fear breaking him apart. "I hear them. I don't want to go to them. I don't want to be chained." Derek clutched at the seat, tossing himself around in panic, terrified of what he was hearing. "Enough! You're athletes! We'll run! Fast legs fear nothing!" It was a stupid joke, but I was trying my best. If they lose their minds, then I'll lose mine too. "They won't let us go! They're torturing us on purpose! We won't be able to leave!" Adam screamed and laughed. It was terrifying and insane all at once. I almost slammed on the brakes, but I kept going. "Where did you get that from?" I tried to speak with confidence. "They're saying it. They want us to stay here forever. They're cursing us." Just as he finished speaking, something darted under the car's wheels. I was scared, but I didn't stop. It felt like I'd actually run over someone or something. Then a scream. It sounded as though it was directly in my ears. And in front of my eyes, the horrible image of a person with a crushed head appeared. It clung to the car's hood and stared at me. Adam couldn't take it anymore and just collapsed onto the back seat. He and Derek started crossing themselves again, holding up crosses at every window, to which this creature just laughed and pulled out a cross, a crooked and rotten cross. It started banging on the car window. I couldn't see where I was driving, but everything inside me screamed that if I stopped now, we'd never make it home. The glass cracked, but not badly, and it laughed, staring at me with its wild eyes. I couldn't look away, and only managed to shout to my friends to guide me, otherwise we'd die. Adam was still unable to get his hands on himself. He just fell and tried to squeeze himself between the back seat and the passenger seat. I was already shaking with nerves and fear. I started hearing strange hissing sounds, and only Derek was shouting when and where to turn, and the one who was on our hood suddenly looked at him. Derek started gasping for air like a fish stranded on the shore. He couldn't say a word. The car was swerving wildly on the strange road, and I could feel us hitting the sides again and again. A couple more of those, and the car would definitely be thrown off the path. "Adam! Come on, or we're dead!" I shouted, but my throat was tightening. I started coughing heavily, and that thing rubbed its hands together and greedily glared with its eyes. And then it climbed onto the roof. But neither I nor Derek felt any better. Its target was the last one of us who could still do something. It was Adam. The loud pounding on the roof of the car was too intense. Adam was screaming prayers and trying not to look out the windows. He clutched his head with his hands, begging to be left alone. But the banging on the windows became his breaking point. He almost lost control of himself and nearly opened the car. Thankfully, I had locked it completely. He looked at me, unsure of what to do. I tried to ask for help, but I couldn't speak. A little longer, and I would have lost control too. My hands weren't gripping the wheel as tightly anymore. My legs were cramping with a terrible spasm, and the horrific figure was crawling over the car, laughing. It was trying to break the windows. It waved across and struck it all over the car, then simply jumped off. It felt like we kept knocking it down, over and over. Such a thing is impossible to explain in words. The wildest feeling of running over a person, then driving over them again, and it climbs back onto the hood so you can see what you've done. My head was spinning, reality was slipping from my mind, and I too started to panic. I looked at the road, but it seemed like I no longer saw it. Everything was in a fog with strange images. I couldn't wrap my head around the thoughts of dying, of being chained to this place just like them. "Ed, I can't, but I'll try." Adam, through his hysteria, tried to sit in the passenger seat. Derek was just screaming about how we would be cursed, that we were murderers, then gasped for air and fell silent. I was afraid to look at him, and so was everyone else. Adam tried not to look at us either. He grabbed the wheel, and I realized he was trying to steer with me. We had practiced, somehow, in case we needed to quickly take control and avoid an accident. And now, despite everything, we were trying to make a dangerous maneuver. I turned to my friend, but it was pointless. Instead of his usual face, I saw that same man. He was everywhere. I screamed, and so did he. I couldn't tell if it was hallucinations or reality. Everything felt so real, and he laughed. "You'll die." And then more laughter. Neither Derek nor Adam, just me and him. The car was careening God knows where. I was shaking. My hands and legs were going numb. My fingers were gripping the wheel so tightly I couldn't loosen them. My legs felt like they were filling with lead, and he laughed. He just laughed in my face, and I couldn't see the road. I couldn't look away from him. Everything around me was noisy and banging. I couldn't control myself, and the man sitting next to me was just grinning and rubbing his hands together. His eyes became almost transparent. He opened his mouth with crooked teeth and grabbed my hand. I felt it go numb. Then a sharp pain flooded it. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Derek screaming that he hadn't killed it. But I didn't understand anything. I didn't hear Adam's voice at all, as if he wasn't even there with us. The sharp pain made me scream. Blood was running down my arms, and for the first time, I began silently reciting a prayer. I don't know where I remembered it from, but it wasn't a prayer for salvation. It was a prayer for the peaceful repose of a lost soul. Before my eyes stood people. They were reaching their hands to the sky with candles, as if we were returning to the very beginning of the nightmare. I heard chains crashing to the ground, but not from everyone. And then I saw Adam. He was standing on the side of the road, digging. It was clear that he was digging a grave. There was a chain around his neck, and a black candle stood at his feet. "Adam!" I screamed, as if releasing my last breath. He froze and looked at us. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes had fresh bloodstains. I wanted to stop, but a thought rushed through my mind. I had no right to stay here. I had to leave. I had to take Derek. I had to mourn every person I'd seen. The man sitting next to me began to squeeze my hand tighter. It was unbearable. I was angry and scared. It all weighed too heavily on my subconscious. I wanted to convince myself it wasn't true. This couldn't be true. Then I saw 2 fresh graves. There stood I and Derek. I sharply looked into the rearview mirror, and instead of myself, I saw that man. My world collapsed and shattered. I suddenly understood that we had crashed, and I couldn't come to terms with it. Our bodies were buried somewhere out there, and we had stayed here forever. Every night, that madman who had once been hit by the wheels of a car comes and torments everyone who stayed here and didn't make it home. He was hit by some drunk teenagers a long time ago and didn't even stop, and now he catches everyone to find them. I felt a chilling terror, disgust. The cold hit me like a shock, and the car windows were covered in ice. Then I heard crying. It was a child. The child was asking for his mother to open her eyes. The screech of brakes. I was being dragged somewhere, and I let go of the wheel, covering my face with my hands. I don't remember how I regained my senses. I only remember feeling dead, too terrified to open my eyes for fear of being chained to this cursed place. My body ached terribly, but I seemed to feel warmth. The hoarse laughter and strange heavy breathing near me scared me. Perhaps this was all punishment for something, or maybe I had just ended up in hell. "Ed, are you okay?" It was Adam's voice, but I was still too afraid to open my eyes. "Ed, we're alive!" He laughed, and I finally decided to face the terrible reality. I opened my eyes and saw that my friend's face was smashed, and it seemed like we were in some strange upside-down position. My whole body immediately began to ache. Derek was breathing heavily, and I saw he was holding his leg, which was trapped under something. Bright light hit my eyes. We were on the side of the road, and behind us was the very same road we had driven on yesterday. It still looked black, despite the daylight. "We need to get out of here," I barely managed to say. Everything hurt, and speaking was difficult. Adam carefully unbuckled his seatbelt, and bracing with his legs to avoid falling out suddenly, started to crawl out. He took his time, but I was still relieved to see them alive. Then he helped me out, and we turned our attention to Derek. It was much worse for him. His leg was pinned, and we had to be very careful to pull him out. He had already ended up on the roof of the car, so the risk of falling was minimized. We slowly worked on freeing his injured leg and eventually helped him out. To our surprise, the car was utterly destroyed, but we seemed to be mostly okay. Derek had broken his leg, but we were mostly without fractures, just cuts, bruises, and some scrapes. We were still alive. The phones wouldn't turn on. Either they were dead or they were just destroyed. We moved Derek farther from the wreckage, and I couldn't help but glance at the road. There he was, that crazy man. We all saw him, and Adam sat near Derek. We shuddered as the man laughed and snapped his fingers. The car started to smoke. He didn't miss a chance to kill us. Adam grabbed Derek and we rushed away, stumbling and almost crawling, jumping, doing everything we could to get as far from the car as possible. Then we were knocked onto the asphalt. Everything around us felt like it was in a vacuum. It seemed like I had gone deaf. My back burned unbearably, and strange black ash started to fall onto the road. We didn't look back. We didn't want to see or think about the fact that it wasn't over. We just moved as far from the place as we could and prayed we would never face that horror again. We got picked up by a car, headed to the city we were going to. A young man and a woman drove us to the hospital and weren't surprised by our story. They were always scared to go down that road, but sometimes they had to. They'd had many strange encounters with that stretch, but no one dared check it out, as if something was deliberately making people look away. The road, as such, didn't even exist anymore. No one believed them when they said they'd nearly died there once. They were only saved because the man managed to avoid turning onto that shortcut. But he had seen the strange man that night. We were just lucky to have stayed alive. We called the police to report the crash, but they never found our car. It was so strange. But somehow, no one cared that the car had vanished. When it was time to head back, we were all incredibly anxious. None of us wanted to go anywhere near that place again, not even close. We decided to take the train, which would pass far from there, which already made us feel better. One of the girls, who insisted on coming with us, said we were being foolish, and went with her classmate by car. We didn't try to stop her. No one had believed our story anyway. We got to the city, and were nervous about what might have happened to her, but she arrived without incident. We started gathering information about the road and all the missing people, but we froze when we saw an article. It mentioned that nearly 10 years ago, a couple of newlyweds had disappeared. Neither they nor their car were ever found. We looked closer and turned pale. It was the same couple who had driven us to the hospital,